Welcome to the Arrowhead Addicts list of top 50 Chiefs of all time. What we're doing today is number 20 through 16. Fellas, Adam Best, Matt Connor, myself, Sterling Holmes, how we doing?
Great. Ready to talk some Chiefs?
I'm excited. This is a very good list. This is a fun list of five, starting with number 20. We were all very close on this guy. Giving the big man up front some love. This dude was undrafted, went to Dallas, didn't play for Dallas, just a practice squad guy. Thank you, Cowboys, for messing up yet again post-great era. That's Brian Waters. Brian Waters coming in at number 20. Matt Connor, you had him at 19. I had him at 18. Patrick had him at 20. Adam Best had him as 20 as well. Little side note, Patrick Allen not with us on this five. Some kid. Like, he's having a kid. Like, come on now. Just like have the little baby, tiny little baby right here. Come on. Just have him on the show. We want little baby on the show. Besides the point.
Indoctrinate him right off the bat, right?
Perfect.
Number 20, though, Brian Waters. Matt Connor, I will start with you. You had him at 19.
For a franchise that has a number of truly great offensive linemen, and the Hall of Fame bears witness to that, I love him for the story of being an undrafted free agent and being able to stand alongside some of those guys who were first rounders, early guys. You know, you got a guy who made 6 Pro Bowls, 2 first-team All-Pros. Not only that, but he was the 2009 Walter Payton Man of the Year. So when we're talking about guys in this section, in the top 20, you're talking about guys who were strong civic leaders, locker room presences, captains on the roster, coaches' favorites, and then also by far exemplary performers on the field for a very, very, very long time. So when we're in this mode, we're talking about really no weaknesses. We're arguing great against great. And Waters is one of those guys who like kind of came up from nothing, played with a chip on his shoulder the whole time. You know, he had to make my top 20.
Yeah, 11 seasons in Kansas City, culminating in 6 Pro Bowls, two-time first-team All-Pro, and as you mentioned, the Walter Payton NFL Man of the Year. The only offensive lineman in the AFC to have received the award, and the only lineman in the NFL to win the award since 1992. Adam Best, you had him at number 20.
Yeah, you mentioned his origin story with the Cowboys. They didn't know what to do with him. They thought maybe a fullback or something, some kind of hybrid player. Then he went to the now defunct NFL Europe to play for the Berlin Thunder and eventually made his way into being a staple, kind of the third banana, but an extremely good third banana on perhaps the greatest offensive line the league has ever seen. It's definitely in the conversation. And that's going to be a reoccurring theme with these 5 guys today. It's kind of uncanny how they've taken kind of the road less traveled to get to Chief stardom. It's really going to be something we see over and over again. But his story is amazing, amazing guy, amazing player. Running behind that line, we had some very, very good running backs run behind that line. I think I could pick up 3 yards in a cloud of dust behind that line. Right? My knees are completely toast, but I still think I could do it. That was an unbelievable period in Chiefs offensive football.
By the way, I could not gain 0.3 yards. If I fell forward, I would lose yards behind that line. I would say that.
I do love that the Cowboys originally tried to take a chance on him, as you mentioned, fullback, tight end, no clear game plan for Brian Waters. Then you look at him now and you're like, yeah, how did you not see this behemoth of a man playing on the offensive line? And then they decided at the very last year of Brian Waters' career to give him a 1-year, $3 million contract. Like, you know how he's already played 13 years in the NFL now and he's about to retire? Yeah, now let's try him out at guard. Now let's see what we can do with him. I just thought
the one that got away, right?
Dallas Cowboys. Yeah, the great white buffalo. Yeah, Brian Waters, man, great memories of him growing up. Again, he's part of the offensive line that I think a lot of folks my age grew up watching. You know, I'm now 30 years old, but when you watch that offensive line, you had a greater appreciation for not just the wide receivers or the quarterback, but we really did focus on, yes, Priest and Larry and Marcus Allen prior to that and all the running backs, but we noticed and understood the offensive line. They're the guys up front making the holes for those dudes to run through. And it's why I will always go back and say I think Chiefs fans are very intelligent in understanding the value of the offensive line, unlike some other fan bases. We weren't always graced with great wide receivers. We weren't always graced with great quarterbacks, but we were graced with great players up front in the trenches, perpetually scoring points that way instead of the other way.
You guys remember that, I think it's October 2004, if memory serves me correct here, that game against the Falcons, 8 rushing TDs. It was something like 56-10, and both LJ and Priest Holmes went off. I have never seen an offensive line run block better than Waters, Shields, Rofe, all those gents on that particular afternoon.
Man, I do not remember that, but that sounds unbelievable. Let me ask you guys this. Do you think that Waters is going to get in the Hall?
It's so hard given that he's in the shadow of one of the best guards and one of the best tackles of all time. And also, I don't know, you have a charismatic coach in Dick Vermeil. You have Tony Gonzalez on that team, Priest Holmes. He just is kind of overshadowed by a bunch of guys. It's going to be hard, but I think he's certainly deserving of being considered for the Hall of Fame.
I'm trying to see how many offensive linemen in totality are in the Hall of Fame. It looks like there's 48, right? So there's 48 current offensive linemen, guards, tackles, and center in the Hall of Fame. So when you're doing it by this, you're like, is he top 50, top 60 offensive linemen of all time? That's what the NFL Hall of Fame is looking at. It looks like from the list I have in front of me.
I mean, are you going to put 3 guys from the same line in the Hall then? If
That's
there's
crazy.
only 50 total?
It's hard.
I'm just asking the question. He's a worthy inclusion into the conversation. I think you're right about that, Adam.
Yeah.
I don't know what I think overall there.
Not knowing what he thinks, but asking the tough questions. That is Matty C. Let's get into number 19. Another back-to-back undrafted player. That is Deron Cherry. Deron Cherry coming in at 19 on our top 50 Chiefs of all time. Matt Connor, 20th. I had him at 16. Patrick Allen, 15. Adam Best, 22. Best, I will start with you this time. Deron Cherry, 22.
Yeah, we're all grouped pretty close here. He was a hell of a player. I remember him playing, obviously, during the 80s. He made the 1980s All-Decade team. That's league-wide. And in terms of his perseverance, he was an undrafted free agent. That's how he came into Kansas City. 3-time first-team All-Pro. Another NFL Man of the Year. I think it was in 1988 here. So a really storied Chief, really probably would be better known if he wasn't kind of out in the wilderness during one of the worst periods of Chiefs football imaginable, but definitely deserving of this top 20 ranking, or top 25 ranking is sort of where I had him.
Yeah. 3-time first team All-Pro, 84, 86, 88. Love the alternative years there because in between in 83 and 85, he was second team All-Pro, 6-time Pro Bowler. You mentioned the Walter White NFL Man of the Year, NFL 1980s All-Decade Team, Kansas City Chiefs.
Wait,
Hall
did you
of
say
Fame.
Walter White?
Whizzer White. Wow. I'm with you. I looked at your outfit, dude. I looked at your outfit and
you combined Walter Payton Man of the Year with Whizzer White, and you got Heisenberg. You got Breaking Bad. I love it.
I saw your outfit. I just was like, Walter White. I was going to make a joke as we opened the show and just completely forgot. So that's on me.
I'm not cooking anything up in here except takes.
He also is tied with the NFL record for most passes intercepted in a single game with 4. And the story about that is absolutely hilarious. He goes, I would have had 7 or 8, but it was so wet you couldn't catch the ball at all. And then one of his teammates actually came away with 1, and he was not super thrilled because he's like, I was going to set the record. I remember some stories about that particular game. That was pretty funny. 50 interceptions, though, in his NFL career. 50. I think a man who, again, should have been considered for the NFL Hall of Fame. But you're right, Best, playing in such a poor era of Chiefs football.
Look, that 50 interceptions is so big because he only had 1 in his first 2 years. And then he just goes crazy. He goes 7, 7, 7, 9, 3, and then 7. He had 40 interceptions in a 6-year gap of time. That was really kind of his prime years. And they all happen in this, like you said, forgettable period in which, like, when you're watching, it's like, it's the cherry on top of nothing else. He's
Sunday.
The only dessert there whatsoever. 6 straight Pro Bowls in that time. He just had an incredible knack for getting his hands on the ball. Even one year he had 7 interceptions and 6 fumble recoveries. It's like almost every single game, the guy is like jumping on the ball, making a game-changing play on defense. And unfortunately, the Chiefs rarely capitalized on the impact that he would bring, to really kind of take it to the next level. So fortunately for fans during that time, at least you had Deron Cherry to watch. But I think the way that we remember him is you're right, a lot less than, honestly, we probably should have put him in the top 15 here because he's such a huge impact. But yeah, he's just part of that 80s crew that we kind of skip over.
50 interceptions, by the way. That is third in Chiefs history behind Emmett Thomas and someone we'll get to here in a bit.
In a little funny tidbit here, in 2019, the Professional Football Researchers Association named Cherry to the PFRA Hall of Very Good class of 2019. So there you go. They have him in the Hall of Very Good. Let's get to number 18, one of my personal favorite players, a man whose last name I share with. That is Priest Holmes. Priest Holmes at 18, Matt Connor 15. I had him at 14. Patrick Allen 18. Adam Best 19. Matt Connor with you. Priest Holmes.
Look, if you're of a certain age, this is like the guy you're so excited to talk about. You have the line. We've talked about some members of the line. We'll get to other members of the line. That's great. But it's still like you have to have the guy generating the yards behind it. It's so interesting to me that he gets his start. He's not like through and through a Chief, right? he begins his career elsewhere with the Ravens.
Wins a Super Bowl. Yeah, won a Super Bowl with the Ravens. Yeah.
And then like comes to town and it wasn't even a signing that you would even think that much of at the time. And then it's like he went into a phone booth, took off his Ravens uniform and put on a superhero outfit. Like it was like Marvel mutant level abilities where you're watching this guy. He's cashing in touchdowns like they're first downs, putting up totals that were just so gargantuan. He was just an instant sensation. It was just such a shame the injuries took the toll that they did on him. But man, when you're watching in that time, it was just about, other than Mahomes, it was like about as exciting as I thought Chiefs football could get.
Yeah, it's a very good point. And by the way, this is our third straight undrafted player, which again just goes to put in perspective. You can make an impact anywhere you go. And you're right. It is fairly funny because the Chiefs just signed him to an inexpensive contract. The Ravens won the Super Bowl, decided to go with rookie running back Jamal Lewis. So he's like, well, all right, where am I going to go? I'll sign a cheap contract with the Chiefs. Like, imagine just any player in today's day and age, like Keontae Ingram. I don't know who it would be, but it'd be like one of those smaller name guys all of a sudden going, oh, yeah, okay. All of a sudden now he's going to turn into one of the best running backs in NFL history. It's crazy. And then you look at like even the pre-draft measurables, which goes to show you can get it done anyway. He ran a 4.73. He's 5'8", almost 5'9", 213, ran a 4.73. No wonder he went undrafted. Ain't nobody lining up for that. And then all of a sudden, he lined up behind the best line in NFL history and decided that he was going to break the NFL touchdown record. Best, Priest Holmes.
Whew, what can you say? Kurt Warner probably is the best underdog story in league history, but Priest Holmes has to be up there. A modern comp for you younger Chiefs fans would be Roschon Johnson at Texas, sitting behind Bijan Robinson. If Roschon Johnson now in the NFL became the best running back in the league, that is actually what happened with Priest Holmes sitting behind Ricky Williams and kind of in a weird way meandering a little bit through his early stint in Baltimore. He's a good player, but nowhere near what he was in Kansas City. And then in Kansas City, he just arguably becomes, for the short period he played, one of the greatest to ever do it. So I actually have a pretty great story about Priest Holmes when he kind of first got on my radar. I just had knee surgery, so I'll never forget it. I went to this game on crutches, the inaugural Big 12 championship in St. Louis between number 3 Nebraska and the underdog Texas Longhorns. For some reason, he was playing that day. He was starting. I don't know if it's injuries or whatever. He had like 120 yards. And I thought this guy is going to be something someday. Mm-hmm. But, you said the reason he didn't get drafted was because, compared to a lot of running backs, he's small and slow. However, I think he might have the best vision of any running back to ever play the game. His vision was unreal. And it wasn't just seeing things, it was sensing things. He felt holes before they opened. He just had this innate feel for the game. It's almost like Travis Kelce-esque. Just an understanding of space and what's happening around him that just very, very, very few players ever develop. So he was a special player, not because of, he's just this workout warrior, but the intangibles. He was just a great football player.
Yeah, seriously, who would you have compared this guy to? Didn't really play it. Well, no. Yeah, but like body type wise, almost CEH. But he had 1,000 yards in 98, right? And then 500, and then 588 in 16 games in 2000. And then basically it seemed like no one really wanted him. It's not Keontae Ingram. That was me being facetious because Keontae.
But it's like a Devin Singletary it's like that.
Yeah, it's like a Devin Singletary maybe. That's like a very good comp. And you're sitting like, okay. And all of a sudden imagine Devin Singletary turning into, again, one of the best running backs in a period of like NFL history. It's just insane, the rise and the stardom of Priest. My first jersey I ever had was a Priest Holmes jersey. I was lucky enough to get it signed. I was unlucky enough to wear it so often that the signature has now wore off. It's okay. I got my worth out of it. Okay. I think if you look at it very closely, you'll see a slight little Sharpie outline, but maybe that's just my imagination because I knew where it was. But man, Priest Holmes was legitimately one of a kind.
What's amazing to me is if you think about like the numbers themselves, like in the next 3-year period, like he signs after getting 588 yards. He comes into the Chiefs. Over the next 3 years, he has more than 6,500 yards from scrimmage. Not return yards, but like either rushing or receiving, more than 6,500 yards. Like we go bananas if a guy has a 2,000-yard season now, right? Like that's
insane. Yeah.
It's Christian McCaffrey. He was Christian McCaffrey back then.
He comes in for the price of whatever they paid and turns into Christian McCaffrey and is scoring touchdowns by he's buying eggs at the store by the dozen. And even when he gets injured, because this is the other talking point I wanted to bring up with him, it makes me wonder, in that 4th season in Kansas City, through only 8 games, he was up to 14 touchdowns already, right? So the year before he had 27, and everyone was like, holy cow, what's happening in Kansas City? And then the next year, he's actually on a greater pace in yards per game and touchdowns than he was the year before when he was like becoming Christian McCaffrey, basically. And then the injury sets in. Like then he's really never the same again. But it wasn't
Sean Merriman, dude. Okay, and it had to be a Charger. It just had to be an AFC West team. And yes.
Also, that it was a hip injury, right? And Kansas City already had a devastating hip injury take out one of our best athletes in Bo Jackson. So
it was spinal though as well.
It was spinal. It was spinal as well.
Yeah.
I guess I just think it wasn't just like one great season. It was even more than like LJ, which is why he's higher on the list. Like you had this, it wasn't just even a 3-year period. It was like, it was going to be a 4-year period. And it just makes me wonder, what if that had never happened? Like how many years would we be talking about? It was amazing to watch for sure.
Yeah, he reminds me a little bit in mentality of Austin Eckler, a guy that was undrafted. There's nothing about him that screams at you, but the guy just had drive, unbelievable drive. And I think he would have continued to work out and his game would have aged well because it wasn't dependent on speed or quickness or anything like that. He was tough. and he could see the field better than really anybody.
Yeah. Next on our list, we went from 3 straight undrafted players to number 17, a man who was drafted very, very early, 5th overall in the first round. Safety Eric Berry. Eric Berry, Matt Connor 12, myself 17, Patrick Allen 19, Adam Best 16. I'll start with you, Best.
Just an unbelievable player and an inspiration to all of us. Of course, he overcame Hodgkin's lymphoma, beat cancer, and really had a triumphant comeback. I think the moment that encapsulates that comeback for me was a game in Atlanta, because he's from Georgia. A game in Atlanta in 2016 where he ran back not only an interception, but he ran back a 2-point conversion for a touchdown as well. Ultimately came back a second time from an Achilles injury, I believe, if I'm remembering that right. So just one of my favorite Chiefs ever, and one of the ultimate what could have been. We were talking about what could have been with Priest Holmes. I mean, this guy, without the cancer and the Achilles, he had Ed Reed, top 3 safety of all time potential. And that was the book on him coming out of college. I mean, picking a safety 5th overall is really, really high historically, but he definitely deserved it. Was a ball hawk, could really do anything you wanted defensively. And I think it's pretty awesome that the Chiefs have 2 safeties on the 2010s all-decade team in him and the Honey Badger, Tyrann Mathieu.
Yeah, look, I have him highest, I think, right? I'm at 12. I know we all love Eric Berry. We all have him. He's this high for a reason, so no one's dogging Eric Berry. But I think for me, there's a section of Chiefs fans who have a real hard time, I think, giving Berry his due because of some of the injuries, because of the, your greatest ability is your availability. And then they just they let the numbers speak for themselves, and that was it. That's really funny to me, because if you really watched Eric Berry, and it's not like he's not old. It's not like we're talking about him in the 80s, or 60s or 70s. I mean, so I'm like, he's not old. You all are old enough to have watched him. So why do I feel so differently? But safety had never been taken that high in the draft until Scott Pioli turned in his name for number 5. It was a major talking point at the time because of the size of contracts given to players that high up in the draft. So, suddenly he's saddled with this contract. But even with the Volunteers, you knew what was coming. You knew what was coming when you saw him. And then when he came into the pros, he was from week one, an impact defender who he just looked like he'd been there 10 years. He was when you said Ed Reed, to me, Eric Berry is one of the 3 or 5 best safeties to ever play the game ever. And I don't care about the number of years. I don't care about the time missed. I don't care. I'm not playing what if. I'm saying if you watched him, he came into the league as elite as could be. He was so good that he could suffer a career debilitating injury and bounce back to still be elite among his own peers. He's never been one for press. He's always been he's shied away. Where's he at now? He's hardly ever in the limelight ever. You never see him on social media and interview. He's just always been the quiet, courageous leader who earns the respect of his peers and his coaches and fans just by getting the job done on the field in a way that no one else can. And then he just walks off and lets it all speak for itself. Hey, you can check the tapes. I'm out of here kind of thing. I hate that I love his story of the comebacks and all that kind of stuff, but I just hate that some people won't give him his full due because the numbers don't add up to something, because it's like a Gale Sayers kind of thing of
yes,
of if you saw him lay the wood like he did, and it wasn't just he's a hard hitting safety. He would know he was the ball hawk, he was the free range, he was the hard hitter, he was the leader of men, he was the communicator, he was the upstanding citizen in the community. I mean, everything player, you ever want to what?
5-tool player.
5-man, anything you could ever want a player to be, that's what Eric Berry was. I want to put him in my top 10. I mean, to me, I want to say, other than maybe Derek Thomas, he is the best Chiefs defender, except I have to admit there's something to longevity, and you got to give that credit. And I slid him out of my top 10 for that reason. But yeah, other than that, I love Eric Berry. I'm gonna beat the drum for him every time.
Yeah, I mean, he basically played 5 full seasons in Kansas City. The rest were, injuries, cancer, and the day-to-day is what I think gets so many fans. And I absolutely hate it. And that's what it comes down to me. When I heard fans call him soft. And when I heard that, I erupted in anger. I mean, the audacity, because he's listed as day-to-day, and the audacity to call a man who came back from cancer, who's gone through what he has been through, who continuously was there and was the most incredible player I've ever seen at safety in my lifetime. You're right, Matt. If you were there, you witnessed it. If you were there, you understood it. He was the most talented player we have ever seen play safety. Ed Reed is the only guy that Ed Reed and Eric Berry. There's no one in today's NFL that I'm like, yeah, he was on the same page. They were on the same tier. There was no one. So when I hear people talk about the day-to-day and, he could have came back. He played in that one game. And he came back for the playoff game. Like, do you see him? Have you done any research about the injury? Do you know what he tried to go through? Because he's not someone, as you mentioned, who's in the limelight, who's constantly going to say, I'm super hurt, I'm this, I'm that. No, he tried. He never made excuses. Eric Berry's a badass, dude. And I thoroughly, I'll say I'll never tell anyone how to fan, but when you disrespect Eric Berry, or when people do and say things about him, especially in regards to the day-to-day, I get furious, man. It's unfair.
If you've ever seen anybody go through chemo, and my mom is a cancer survivor, you would never in a million years even imagine calling Eric Berry soft. It's very unfortunate because he was on that 2018 team with the Bob Sutton defense that was just absolutely atrocious and really kept the Chiefs from winning a Super Bowl. And I think frustrated fans at that point, because we're talking about a 50-year Super Bowl gap, are pointing the finger at anyone they can point the finger at. And it's just very unfortunate that his career ended then and not the next season, right? Or the season, one of these seasons when they won a Super Bowl. Because I think the last image some fans have of him is that Patriots game, right? That where the defense really fell apart and cost the Chiefs. So yeah, I think we should remember him at his highs, and it's just a damn shame. I mean, I feel the same way about Jamal Charles. This is a Hall of Fame talent who we kind of are going to be robbed of him being in the Hall of Fame because of stuff that happened with his body.
Yeah. Let's get into number 16. Number 16 on the list of top 50 Chiefs of all time. Safety to safety, right? Another first round safety, technically picked 3rd overall in the first round from LSU. Johnny Robinson. Matt Connor, you had him at 14. I had him at 15. Patrick Allen, 12. Adam Best, 18. Matt Connor, I will start with you.
It's almost like the exact opposite of the argument we just made, right? Of longevity meaning something. And here I had to give the nod to Johnny in terms of well, by the way, how great that the Chiefs have had the safeties that they've had. They've had some remarkable safety play over the years. But Robinson twice led the league in interceptions, 57 total. I mean, just think about every time someone gets an interception where you're like, yeah, it's just such a game-changing play. It's hard. It's a hard play to make. When Robinson's able to make them so consistently over so many years, he's got such an incredible body of work. It's no surprise that he's in the Pro Football Hall of Fame as part of that celebrated defense and then celebrated by the Chiefs as well. The numbers are there. He's just one of those all-time defensive greats. Normally we talk about the guys up front, but Robinson's one of those guys in the secondary and one of the first true great defensive backs in this franchise.
What's crazy about Johnny Robinson was in the AFL, he also played flanker. He had 150 carries for 658 yards and also had 1,228 receiving yards on 77 receptions, 15 touchdowns.
Like a hybrid.
Yeah, he was a hybrid. He was a little bit of everything. Again, we don't know how great he was in person. I could tell you Eric Berry. I can bang the drum for why Eric Berry is where he's at. Johnny Robinson, we're going off of legacy, we're going off of stats, and the legacy of Johnny Robinson is just phenomenal. You mentioned it, man. 57 interceptions. 57 interceptions. he was the guy on defense, especially in the secondary for that first Super Bowl winning Chiefs team. It's too bad that the majority of his time came in the AFL. Would love to see more of those NFL accolades to see what those would have looked like, obviously, if he would have came around a little later. But yeah, Johnny Robinson, absolute badass in Chiefs lore. Again, as you mentioned, there's a reason why he's in the NFL Hall of Fame.
Yeah, back during Jurassic times, I was actually a safety for a minute in college before my niece betrayed me. And let me tell you, it is an incredibly hard position from a mental standpoint. So for this guy to go to the pros and screw around as an offensive player for 2 years and then say, oh, I'm going to be a safety now. And not only am I going to be a safety, I'm going to play safety for like a decade for the Chiefs, I guess the Texans and the Chiefs. And then I'm going to end up being only one interception shy of Emmett Thomas, who is the greatest cornerback in franchise history and a Hall of Famer. He's only one interception behind him as a safety. And if you think about the defensive backfield, it's a weak link system. So the good guys don't get thrown at as much. So 57 interceptions for a safety is a remarkable number.
I will also point out, dude is still around. I think he's in Louisiana. I think he moved back to Louisiana after football. We should try and get 85-year-old Johnny Robinson on. I would love to know his thoughts about this current iteration. I have not heard of Johnny Robinson, no interviews, none of that stuff. I don't know what good old Johnny's up to, but that'd be pretty badass.
Get all these safeties back. You know, have a round table with Johnny Robinson and Eric Berry and Deron Cherry and the Honey Badger. There we go.
Well, we can't have Justin Reed because of you.
Yeah, that's my fault.
All right, this was the top 50 Chiefs of all time. This was number 20 through 16. Again, 20, Brian Waters, 19, Deron Cherry, 18, Brees Holmes, 17, Eric Berry, 16, Johnny Robinson. 3 undrafted players, 2 first-rounders, showing you better go in the first round or go undrafted. Second through 6, second through 7, that's no good. We'll be back next time for list number 15 through 11 of the top 50 Chiefs of all time.